and welcome to SCOM Bomb, the weekly Google Hangout where I, Will Grant, the gentleman down there, Rod Lambert, discuss the world of science, communication, and communication science. All of those things together. Rod, how are you this week?
I'm so damn well because I'm enjoying Canberra's menopausal autumn weather where it's hot one moment, freezing the next, and everything in between. I don't know how to dress for this.
Oh, it's very hard, isn't it? It's a difficult world for you to dress entirely for different temperatures. How hard is that? Okay, take your jacket off.
I know they say use your layers, but I don't know what layers to wear. I mean, I'm wearing a flannel shirt, but I don't need it. That's why I have to turn the air conditioner on.
Look at this tie. Look how hot my neck is right now if I step out into the sun, but how nice and warm it is if I am inside an office.
You're going to court, is that right? That's why you're wearing a tie? They finally caught you?
Maybe. Rod, who do we have this week?
Well, look, I'm embarrassed to introduce this person because we were talking before about her, before we started, about her many, what's the word, many achievements. And she said she's just a person. I find it hard to believe. When I read down this list of achievements, I think she's actually 3 people. So I'm going to introduce Professor Jenny Martin, who is 3 people, and she's in charge of all the crystallography in the Southern Hemisphere, or something like that. How are you, Jenny?
I'm well. How are you, Rod?
Smashing, smashing. So, like, crystallography, what's that all about and why? But in layman's terms, because Will and I aren't very bright, we're social scientists.
We know how to count people, not actual things.
Yeah, and moods. We can tell you about emotions.
Okay, well, I guess some people think that crystals can tell you about your emotions, but...
They can. Mood rings. I don't have a mood ring right now, but I've seen them in the shops.
Excellent.
Are you a mood ring scientist?
Well, we're sort of different sorts of crystallographers, though. But I guess it's fair to say that people have been fascinated by crystals for millennia. You know, we wear them as jewels. People have seen that ice or snow forms crystals from water. There's, I guess, crystals in a lot of natural things like rocks and food, and I guess, we're interested in them because crystals are really formed from, well, they're magical in a way because they're formed from a...
I knew it! I knew it!
You've got that on tape.
I knew crystals are magic.
I'm just going to tweet that, excuse me for a second, Jenny.
Crystals are magical. I'm happy for you to tweet that. They're magical because...
Stop you there, Jenny. I need to ask a question, though, because from what you've just described, nothing isn't crystals.
Well, when you think about it, a lot of things are crystals. Look, when you get up in the morning and have your breakfast, the eggshells that you break to make your eggs, they're made from crystals. You've got sugar that's made from crystals. Salt that's made from crystals. The teeth that you eat your food with are crystals. The little crystals in your inner ear that keep you balanced, that's made from crystals. Everything's made from crystals.
Wow.
I'm a bit stunned. Like, so, is anything not a crystal?
Oh, yeah. Things that aren't crystalline aren't crystals.
That's cheating. That's cheating. We need an actual definition, not a circular.
Things that aren't animals aren't meat, we know.
Crystal is a specific sort of a solid. So you've got solid, liquid, and gas. So liquids and gases aren't crystalline. Crystals are a specific sort of solid where the material in the solid is formed from a repeating unit that that goes on forever. So if you were standing inside a crystal and you looked above you and below you and behind you and in front of you, you'd see exactly the same molecule in exactly the same way. So it's the crystals are magic, I think, because they've formed from material that has organized itself into this 3-dimensional array. So that's pretty magical.
Yeah, that counts as magical. Hey, actually, here's a jump forward, and I'm jumping way forward in the technical discussion here, so you're going to have to come back in a bit and explain some more of your knowledge for us dopies. But if crystals are magical and they're self-organizing, I've heard this stuff that maybe crystals are where life originally came from.
What?
I've heard that as a theory. Like that self-organization could be a part of the first sort of life.
Is that a theory at a party somewhere near Nimbin, and did the party involve...
Look, they had the bong, and they had the crystal, and they were like...
Wait, man, maybe life came from this. Is that how that happened? Well, I've not heard this. Have you heard this, Jenny?
I like that theory, but I'm not familiar with it, I have to say, but it doesn't mean it's not right.
Okay, I will say maybe it was from Nimbin then.
So if I understand correctly, then one of the critical things about crystals is it's the same kind of structure repeated. Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah, it's a three-dimensional arrangement of the same molecule or complex or whatever you're looking at, and that's why they're magical in a way, because of the arrangement. So a snowflake is an arrangement of water molecules in a particular way. Diamond is an arrangement of carbon atoms that are arranged in a three-dimensional array, and we can make protein crystals in the same way.
Protein, so that's getting back to life then.
That's right. Well, crystals impact on everything. They impact on art, they impact on food, they impact on global warming, they impact on new energies, new fuels, they impact on the computer screens that we're looking at or using, smartphones. All of these things are developed or impacted by studies in crystallography.
Okay, so can you tell me, I mean, this probably connects on to that point. Why has Ban Ki-moon decided that this is the International Year of Crystallography?
He wants free diamonds.
Why this year, or why not every year?
Well, okay. Why this year? Let's go with why this year.
So we'll just start with this year, I suppose. It could have been any one of a number of years over from 2012 to 2015, I guess, because they all celebrate a centenary that was pivotal to the development of the science. So crystallography as a science or a field is celebrating its centenary. And crystallography relies on having a crystal, which we've talked about is a solid that is arranged with molecules that have a periodic arrangement, so that they're all arranged in the same way in 3 dimensions. But the critical experiment that happened was after the discoveries of X-rays. So X-rays were discovered in 1890 by Röntgen. Yeah. And one of the first things he did was irradiate people with X-rays, and of course it was used immediately then for medical applications. And the famous photograph of Röntgen's wife, I think, was one of his first experimental models. So her hand is immortalized in the famous photograph, the first X-ray photograph. But if you irradiate crystals with X-rays, you get a strange thing happening. You don't produce an X-ray like you would imagine of your bones, but the X-rays interact with the material in the crystal to produce a pattern. And that pattern holds all the information that relates to what's in the crystal. So if you can work out the relationship between the crystal and the pattern, you can work out the atomic level structure.
So what crystallography then, is it marked by techniques or the object of study? Is it like what makes you a crystallographer and someone you've never met before who studies completely different things also a crystallographer? Is it?
Yeah, I guess it's the study of diffraction using crystals, or sometimes these days we don't even use crystals. In fact, there's some new development in technology. I know, it's very exciting. We won't have to make crystals anymore.
So you guys are just crystallography?
No.
So the reason we use crystals is because we need to get enough signal by putting the X-rays through all of these molecules that are arranged in exactly the same way. We can measure a signal that relates to what those molecules look like. But so theoretically,
is this what unites it? Crystals are more like the tool of crystallography rather than the object of study?
Crystallography is the subject, if you like, and what we're trying to answer is what's in the crystal, what makes up the crystal. So
how can you do crystallography without crystals if you're trying to find out about what a crystal is? I'm very confused.
Yeah. Well, it just goes back to the question of what does material look like at the atomic level? So what does a carbon atom look like, or what does an insulin molecule look like? So we can get information about that by irradiating a molecule with X-rays and measuring the diffraction pattern from that molecule. But there's not enough signal in a single molecule to give us information about that atomic level detail, and that's why we need the crystal, which is made up of this periodic 3-dimensional arrangement of molecules. It gives us the signal to noise we need.
So,
But
So-
go ahead.
the original, when he was irradiating these with, I've forgotten his name already, but 100 years ago, with X-rays on these crystals. I mean, are they? Do you need a really pure crystal, or is this?
Crystals are pure by definition. It's actually used as a method of purification. So generally, yes, the crystal, as long as you've got a crystalline material, you should be able to measure that information. There are some variations, of course, but I should point out before we go any further that it wasn't Röntgen that did the X-ray diffraction experiments. The first experiment to show diffraction was done by von Laue in Germany, but it was actually an Australian that worked out the formula to calculate the structure of molecules in the crystal, and he won our first Nobel Prize in 1915.
And his son, wasn't it? Isn't this?
So that's so Lawrence Bragg was the son, and William Bragg was the father. William Bragg was Englishman, and he moved to Adelaide when he was about 25. He married the daughter of William and Alice Todd, and they're very famous in Australia because Alice is the Alice of Alice Springs, and Todd is the Todd of Todd River. And their daughter married William Bragg, and their son was Lawrence Bragg. So he was Australian as anyone you can get. And when he was 22 years old, he'd just finished his undergraduate degree at Cambridge. He worked out this formula, Bragg's law, that allowed us to work out the structure of crystals, and he and his father applied that law, and they won the Nobel Prize in 1915.
So there's money and fame in crystals other than diamond mines.
I think so. In protein, crystals are very valuable. Actually, I should say that there was a book written in the 1990s, called The $1 Billion Molecule. And Barry Worth wrote this book. It's about developing new drugs. And in it, he makes this quote that I have to read. He says, "Crystallographers are the most prized of all protein scientists."
Of all protein scientists, though, that's how many different protein scientists are there?
Oh, there's all sorts.
What then, does crystallography, how much of it have you been obliged to, or have people, not you of course, but your peers, decided to study all the wacky stuff, like if you put a razor blade under 3 crystals, it sharpens itself or turns into a duck, or the whole thing where if you rub a crystal under your armpit, suddenly you don't smell anymore? I mean, have you looked into that?
Just me spraying that.
You haven't looked into that?
No.
Do you know anyone who has? Because we can.
Not interested.
But more seriously, what then in the International Year of Crystallography? What are the research goals? What do you want to achieve in our knowledge of crystals? Why? I mean, I appreciate that celebrating a centenary is great, but what's next that means this is something worth going on for?
Well, I'd like to point out a few of the things that we are celebrating in crystallography, if that's all right with you, and how we're celebrating it, so people can get involved. So there's lots of activities this year. We're actually having a photo exhibition. We held a competition earlier this year on crystallography in everyday life, where people could take photos of things that reminded them of crystallography, things like buildings that look like crystals, or three-dimensional arrays of things, including biscuits or cakes, or...
That reminds them of crystals in everyday life, or crystallography in everyday life, or
crystallography in everyday life. So thinking about the symmetry that's inherent in crystals, but also the crystals themselves. So, so that
with crystals would be actually quite spectacular. Like you'd have to work hard to make it look like crap, wouldn't you? Because crystals are pretty.
That's right. That's right. They are beautiful. Anyway, that exhibition is going to start off in Queensland Museum in a couple of weeks' time. So get along to that. We have sculptures, life-size sculptures of some crystal structures that are going to be held around Australia. That's being done by Helen Maynard Casely and Niraj Sharma. And there's also a blog post of a crystal structure a day. That's Crystal 365. And what?
The address for that? What's that? Where's that?
Oh, if you just go to Crystal 365, you'll see I can't remember which one is today, but there's everybody's there's the crowdsourcing crystallography blog posts. So some members of my group are actually contributing to that, and they're blog posting some protein crystal structures, but other people are posting about materials or chemicals or lots of different things.
So going on the theme of those lots of different things, where does the work that you and your team and the people around the world doing crystallography end up? Does it go into a lot of medicine, protein applications, or is it going into technology for new LCDs, or is it pretty agnostic to that? You know, you work on
all of the above. So what we do is work on protein structures. When we publish, we have to deposit those structures in a database that becomes a resource available to anyone around the world, so that can be used for designing drugs. There's also a chemical database for chemical crystal structures. There are people working on new materials to improve the smartphones we use. There are people working on what else? New drugs. People using crystallography to understand color in the world. So chitin, for example, in butterfly wings and birds' feathers are crystalline. People are using crystallography to look at old artworks and find out what pigments we use so that they can help preserve those images. And of course, as we were talking about before we started, there's a little crystallography machine on the Curiosity Mars rover, and it's looking at soil samples to see what's present.
All right. Well, then I want to know this is two questions. One is what is your favourite new crystal? Because I want to know what are the things that you see about crystals that go, wow, that's just amazing that you replicated this thing. Oh, give us your favourite old crystal as well. What are the things that you see in them that really fascinate you?
Look, there's lots of wonderful things about crystallography, I think, because when you grow your first crystal, there's nothing like it. When you're looking down the microscope, because our crystals are quite small, and you just see these crystals of proteins that have grown out of a solution.
Is it like
that's magic? That's magic.
Like I've made this little thing that's not a life form, but it's a self-organizing little yeah. Is that a little happy moment?
That's a very happy moment. That's cause for celebration.
Do you get a maternal glow?
What's that?
It's sort of a maternal glow. I'm just watching Will choke. I want to ask you a different question though, Jenny. I want to shuffle away from the science. I want to talk about you as a successful science type, who's also, people who are astute will have noticed, a lady scientist. And we all know that to try and be a scientist and be female is physically impossible. So somehow you've managed to not only become one, but staring at your bio, you have a D.Phil, which not everyone gets. Like, you got to work for that. I've read about this. You've had QE2 fellowships, ARC Professor of Research fellowships, NHMRC Senior Research fellowships, Australian Laureate Fellow, member of national committees, international committees. You've won something from a chemical company. You're apparently a smart woman. You've got Biotech Outstanding Achievement Award.
So the government decided that, or is it something you can just decide for yourself?
Officially a smart woman. It says it in pixels. Has being female mattered in positively or negatively in your impression? I have to ask this because it comes up a lot.
Yes.
Not you being female in general in the science world.
Look, I would point you to my blog, which where I write exactly about these issues. It's called Cubist Crystal, so you can look up what I think are the issues affecting women.
Assuming what would you say? What are your top sort of positives and negatives? What's the best bit about being a female scientist, and what's the worst, if you're prepared to tell us?
Look, sometimes for me, where I am now, one of the worst things is that I don't have very many people like me at most committee meetings I go to, because all of the rest of the people tend to be men. And it's very hard to understand what that's like when you're the only one that's different. So you feel different, and you're worried that whatever you say will be taken differently, I guess. So that's one thing that's difficult.
I get that because I'm an idiot. I go to meetings, I think, man, these people are all smart and I'm just an idiot. So
that's not true.
I'm just empathising.
I get it for not paying attention in meetings, so it's the same thing. But yeah, being actively different, I think.
I'll have to start doing that.
It's true. You know what you ought to do? You should live tweet your meetings.
Oh, that would go down well.
Well, no, none of those. You know the term vomits, right? Very old men in ties.
Yeah.
So none of them even know how to spell Twitter.
I'll store that one away. I heard one recently that was mentioned by a man who said that that this particular society was infiltrated with a lot of old men, and he called them pale, male, and stale. So old white men. I thought, I'll have to remember that one.
Pale, male, and stale.
That's right, pale, male, and stale.
It sounds like one of the problems we're facing. Go, William.
I was just going to agree. I'd just say that fighting against being stale is something that everyone has to do. You know, I don't think that's exclusive to the old or the young. I think we all have to find ways to be a little bit more interesting. It's just a problem in the university hierarchy that we always end up with the stale people at the top. Not obviously your university or our university.
All the others. All the
other ones, they're really bad. Yeah, I think that's the thing. Lack of diversity is something that that worries me, because we train all these wonderful scientists at undergraduate and graduate level.
Yeah.
And you can see that it's diverse at that level, but as you go through the hierarchy, there's less and less diversity, and there's a number of reasons for that, and I guess there are things that we have to address as a society and cultural things as well.
Is crystallography, how's it compare in terms of diversity, male, female, etc., compared to other sciences? In your opinion, I realise this isn't statistically.
Yeah, look, this is my own opinion, but I guess I fell into crystallography. I hadn't planned to go into it. I moved to Oxford University to work with a computational chemist, but he was amongst a whole laboratory full of crystallographers, and it was the first time that I'd actually realised there were successful women scientists, women professors. So crystallography actually has a long tradition of high-profile women scientists, including two Nobel Prize winners. Two women Nobel Prize winners are women, and they're both crystallographers. So that, in fact, one of them, Dorothy Hodgkin, was still attending seminars when I was a postgraduate student. So it was a really inspirational time for me, and it made me realize that the first time that there was the possibility that you could be a woman and succeed in science.
Such a benefit to have role models. I mean,
absolutely.
To be trailblazers, that's amazing, but for the rest of society, role models make such a difference in supporting people.
Reading your biography again, which I can't help it sort of shines on the screen. When's your Nobel coming, and what's it going to be?
I'm not aiming for a Nobel.
That's what you're supposed to say. It's like, no, I'm not going for president. I'm not running for prime minister. The last thing on my mind is taking over this organisation. So what I'm hearing is you're aiming for a Nobel.
Okay. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But
I mean, there's a bit of room at the bottom of this email here. I think you could still squeeze one in. You don't have to be old anymore. The Brian Schmidt's only a year or two older than me, and I'm only 24.
It's true.
You got to go, Rod. Time to get your crystallography research in.
I want to get my Nobel Peace Prize in Science Communication. It's a thing. Sorry, literature. But so what do you do, like when you go to the office today, other than, any day, other than make your coffee, check your emails, swear at how many there are, try and get out of meetings, what do you do when you crystallographize? What do you do when you go to work? You put on gloves?
I don't do very much at all, actually. It's all the people in my group that does everything. I just get to hear about it all.
Are you self-organising them? Are they a crystal? No, you can't do that. That's silly.
I could organise them in a crystalline arrangement, I suppose. We're making crystal cakes at the moment to celebrate the International Year of Crystallography. So that's one thing we do. I made one of those.
That's good. And you can just celebrate cakes. You don't even need an international year for that, because cakes are awesome.
I know. Well, we do them anyway, but these have to represent something to do with crystallography.
Which, from what we heard earlier, is virtually any solid.
That's right. Well, not any solid, a crystalline solid, or it could be a crystal structure, or it could be a piece of equipment.
Doing like a cubic zirconia or something, a really boring crystal.
We've had sodium chloride structure. We've had We've had the structure of insulin. Yeah, all sorts of things. People are very creative.
Both of these sound funny to me. So you've got a cake that looks like it's made of salt.
It didn't taste like salt.
But the other one then I think the one that looks like insulin is probably not a bad idea because it sounds like you guys eat a lot of cakes. So that could come in.
It was very
so
handy.
what's your area of focus? Sorry, what do your minions do when you're working? What are your areas of focus research-wise?
So the two things we're working on, we're trying to develop new drugs to treat antibiotic-resistant infections. So we're focusing on proteins. Well, what we're trying to do is develop compounds that, rather than killing bacteria or stopping them growing, which is how all the current antibiotics work, we're aiming to develop compounds that disarm the bacteria, so remove their weapons that make us sick. And we're hoping that might overcome the problem of antibiotic resistance.
So can I just slow down for a second? So antibiotics were just by accident, but so you would be looking at the structure of the protein that is causing problems, or the cell, or something that's going wrong, and then trying to find another crystalline protein. Just keep the word crystal in there so I understand. Do something to that. So how does the process of research work there?
Yeah, so we've identified a major regulator of virulence. It's not one of the weapons that the bacteria uses, but it's like the weapons assembly factory. So it's required to put all the weapons together. So if you knock that out, the bacteria are no longer able to cause disease. They don't die, but they can't be pathogenic, if you like. So we're trying to target that.
You're turning into a man science. I'm hearing about weapons grade, factory.
Oh, it's great.
Now we brought it back to masculine sciences again, so I'm much more comfortable.
Well, it's not so masculine because we're not killing things. We're just removing weapons. We're disarming them. That's the United Nations approach.
So what it means is they get disarmed, and then these bacteria they give up and go home?
Well, the immune system can then deal with them. One of the problems with infections is that the bacteria overgrow and the immune system can't handle it.
Wow. Oh, okay, that sounds quite cool, actually.
Yeah. We better make it work.
Yeah, you got a few weeks, don't you?
Yeah. So that's one part. Have I got time to talk about the other part, or is it?
Go.
I'll be very quick. We're also working on proteins involved in how cells move things around, so how cells package their material and get them sent from one place to another. And we're looking at those proteins as well. And
so that's to understand what's going on there, or perhaps for drug delivery to different spots within the cell?
More drug design in the end. We're looking at how insulin works. So how does insulin make muscle cells take glucose out of the blood? And if we can work that out, then we might be able to develop drugs to treat diabetes in a different way.
It sounds to me that we've moved very much from, say, the drugs developed 50 years ago that were either accidental or blunt force approach. You know, we're just guessing at these different chemical compounds, not understanding why they work, to such a tinier end of medicine. You know, hoping for such a more precise targeting. It sounds amazing that we can do that.
Yes, it's a relatively new approach called structure-based drug design, where you use the crystal structure to tell you about the chemistry of the target, and then you can design a small chemical that that interacts in the right places, in the I guess the weak spots of the protein.
Well, I'm happier now because we've managed to bring it back full circle and discover that crystals are about healing after all. This all works. We have it's symmetry. It's kind of like numerology, only even more validated by science.
I'm going to put out a hashtag, the hippies were right. I think on that note, Jenny, we have to thank you very much for your attendance on SCOM and for opening my brain to the crystal universe. Thank you very much. Rod, who do we have next week?
Well, next week we're interviewing the president of the Australian Science Communicators.
No, what?
I know that's better than Obama because she's better than Obama. Although her accent might sound a little Obamish because she sounds a little American. So it's Joan Leach. She's almost a professor as well. And we're going to have we're going to have her here. We're probably all going to be in the same room and talk to her. So it's going to be exciting.
Breaking out the live poster. Oh my goodness.
I know. We're going to slap it down.
Well, thank you again, Jenny. We'll see you all next week.
All
Thanks,
right.
Jenny.
Thank you. Bye.